Hi, everyone. I want to thank you so much for joining us for the Race to Alaska Q&A. I hope you all enjoyed the film as much as I did. Please remember that it's available for an audience award, so don't forget to rate it and the other films you watch when you're finished. I want to start off by thanking our major film festival sponsors this year, as well as the sponsor of this particular film, Adamski, Morosky, Madden, Cumberland, and Green. I'm excited to have with us today the film's writer, director, and producer, Zach Carver, and producers Ian Moreland and Lee Von Ulrich. We greatly appreciate your time to do this Q&A today with our audience. Unfortunately, we only have about 10 to 15 minutes, but I hope to cover a lot of ground in that time. First of all, where are each of you located now?
We're all in Los Angeles.
Oh, Well, that's great. That makes it easy. Zach, you're an avid sailor, licensed captain, and film boss for the Race to Alaska for 5 years, based on your bio. Is that why you decided to make this documentary?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it fell in my lap. In another way, I, I was called to it because of that too. Because how I got connected with it was I used to work for the founder of the race, Jake Eady, many years ago at the Center for Wooden Boats in Seattle, teaching sailing and maritime history on the water. And so I pursued my film career, and he pursued a life in maritime organizations. And then he had this crazy idea, he needed some filming.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Ian and Lee, why did you join Zach in producing this film? You're not sailors, correct?
Correct.
No, I joined, I made him hire me as a photographer because I thought it sounded incredible for the Race to Alaska in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I got to go up the Inside Passage on a little rib and had the time of my life pretty much. And so in 2019, Carl Kruger, the stand-up paddleboarder, said that he was planning on paddling the Northwest Passage, stand-up paddling the Northwest Passage in the Arctic. And so I thought that would be an incredible documentary. And I immediately called Zach and told him we had to do this thing. And he agreed and called me about a week later and said that we were also going to do the Race to Alaska documentary because it felt like a good time for him. It was rolling up on 5 years since the race started. So,
Ian, what about you?
They forced me into it.
So I gather you're all friends.
Yeah.
yeah.
You know each other already. What were your goals in tackling this film, and do you think you accomplished them?
My goal was the first goal was just to turn an experience, like an event, into a film. And so like finding the narrative was a big challenge. So I really just wanted to find a filmic, exciting narrative that you would engage in, like a big story. And then the second goal was to give somebody a very experiential account of the Race to Alaska. So to give you enough context to understand the risks and dangers and majesty and whatnot, and then get to go along for the ride. And I feel like we did a pretty decent job. So I feel like the goals were well achieved.
Yeah, my goal, well, like I said at the beginning, they kind of forced me into it, but I'm glad they did. But part of the way they did that was every time Zach was going up from Los Angeles to Seattle, once a year, I guess, for 4 years. And so every time he'd kind of come back, I'm like, yeah, I did the Race to Alaska. And I didn't really ask too many questions. And then he and Leave started to just tell me the stories. Like Leave started to go, and each time I was like, wait, hold on. There's a guy who's doing this on a paddleboard. Like, hold on. There's a person whose boat capsized. Like, hold on. There's a hovercraft rescue. There's a whole bunch of like news stories that they wouldn't lead with that were just under the surface. So it became like, how do we get as much of that as possible into the story? And I think we did a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm. Lee, you want to add anything to that?
I think for me, the Race to Alaska is incredibly inspiring. The people who do it are humble, yet incredibly brave and knowledgeable. And they just do it. You know, it's not easy. It may take a long time, but they do it with a sense of humor, and they're not afraid to push their own limits. And I think that was a big theme that I would love to share with more people, because I still watch it and get inspired when I'm having a bad day.
Mhm. Well, how did you decide which crews to feature? Was it based on the footage that you had available, or those who had the most compelling stories? All of the above, something else? Because this was as I understand it, it wasn't just 1 year. You combined a few years together to create this.
Yeah, we combined all the years of footage we have to make like a meta race, and then and by doing that, we got to feature the best stories from a given year.
Mhm.
And it was really a Venn diagram of what you said: the best stories combined with the best footage, usually documented by the teams themselves. So like sometimes someone would come to the dock and they'd stagger off the boat and they'd be telling these crazy stories, but they never had turned the camera on. And I can't, we can tell those, but it'll be nowhere near as visceral as the experience of them documenting it themselves. So the editor Greg King did a great job of hanging our key characters off of people that both had cool stories and self-documented a lot.
Mhm. And the fact that you were there as film boss, does that mean you're essentially directing all the photography for the race from the start to the finish, all
Yeah,
the legs?
sort of just the lead producer. I mean, it was a title they bestowed upon me, and I said, okay, I'll figure out what a film boss is. But they called the race boss the race boss. So, but yeah, it's really just I hire the crew and figure out logistics, and and then we produce during the race itself. We produce a thing called the clip of the day, which is just like a daily documentary, mini documentary that gives people an update on the race.
Uh-huh. And so you were getting the footage from your drones or your own photographers?
Yeah, we
Um,
have cinematographers, drone operators, and then the racers would like turn over memory cards. Like that's one of my favorite things we would do. Like we had a team in Bella Bella, which is the halfway point of the race course, and they would drive out in this little skiff. And oftentimes the racers don't have any service and they don't know what's going on, so they'll just see some skiff like shooting up towards them out of nowhere, and they haven't seen anyone in a day. And we'll like throw them a microphone in a dry bag and do like a moving interview where the boats drive next to each other and do like a little check-in, and then they'll put their memory cards in the dry bag and throw that over, and we'll use those memory cards to, the footage they've shot along the way, do this little exchange.
okay, so all the boats, of course, didn't take their own footage.
No, some people didn't shoot at all.
People didn't shoot at all. Yeah,
Or some lost their phones or their cameras.
yeah, yeah. Um, so what'd you say? How much of the film that we see in the film is actually footage from the sailors themselves, or you guys? The drone. You also use things from drones, and I gather other organizations. So you sort of.
Mostly it's our own produced footage. Like the drone, we had like various drone operators that we hired or worked with.
Mhm.
Um, we did license some from Waterlust. They made a couple of films about racers in the first 2 years, and they're really cool. They make like really sustainable water clothing and are in touch with a bunch of oceanographers. They're in Florida, so they shared their footage with us. But otherwise, it was mostly people we contracted, and a lot of like random volunteer help. We got like volunteer helicopters 1 year, which was okay. Yeah, take my buddy Yana in the helicopter and go film. It's fantastic. So
Oh, that's great. Okay. What were the major challenges in looking back that you faced in creating this film?
uh, I think it took me a really long time to know that there was a movie in all of that footage. I knew there were a lot of great stories, but like figuring out a structure was honestly one of the biggest challenges. And when we finally decided to use the race course as the spine of it, and it's like a hero's journey told through the race course, and that was very like, that's like not the most exciting challenge. Like there were also challenges like how do you film over 750 miles of geography and whatnot, but that was actually probably the like hardest for me, was like how do we make this into like a cinematic journey.
What about you, Lee or Ian, on that score? Were you in the room with Zach in deciding how to frame the story?
There was well, so Leave, I think, can talk a lot about the race course. I wasn't on the race course. They brought me in later, but Zach's totally right. This, like, we did a whole pass of the film that was a different structure than what you see, what you just watched. And how we did that was we typed out basically beat by beat what people were saying, what they were doing. We printed all of that out, and it was probably 30 pages long. And then we cut out every like element. And then Zach has this big office kind of open space. We just laid the whole thing out and then sat there and rearranged it and then retyped that stuff back up and handed that to the editor and was like, here's kind of what we're thinking. What do you think? And that was a couple days of just like, little pieces of paper floating around. Like, it looks like we're trying to solve a serial murder case. And it was just for the race.
Mm-hmm. Leave.
I mean, those are all kind of creative, interesting challenges. The challenge that I think a lot of independent filmmakers bump up against is financing. And so figuring out how to do that has been both a challenge and really interesting and educational. So luckily we got it across the finish line.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me come back to both of those, because essentially creating a storyboard, if you will, how you're going to frame the story, that is critical. And I can appreciate that. I was someone who was in the journalism world for a long time. So that's a difficult proposition. But I think as a viewer watching the race and seeing the legs of the race, and you were very clear, here's where we're going, here's this particular leg, here are the challenges that you face. So I thought to someone who's a non-sailor, as well as to someone who's a sailor, you achieved riveting documentary for both, and they're different people altogether, so that I'm going to come back. Don't let me forget to come back to the money issue, Lee. But I do think that there was the inherent in a race, when you're sailing and you're racing, there is a lot of drama, depending on the challenges thrown at you by the weather, by whether your mast is going to break or your boom is going to, break into, all kinds of challenges. So how did you work to create that tension and drama in this film that's an hour and a half, essentially?
Well, one of the things we learned pretty soon, which is really reflective of the kind of race it is that the drama isn't between who's first. Like in a typical race, maybe it would be more dramatic, as in who's taking the lead, who's falling behind. But this is really people racing against themselves and this like just incredible waterway. And so to me, like, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, and as soon as that race was announced, I was like, that's incredible, that's so hard. But other people are like it's an interesting thing, as you paint the picture, you're like, the race to Alaska, it's 750 miles. So I think a lot of people picture straight line, long way in the water. And then I'm like, well, but it's through a bunch of islands. Oh, that's different. And there's a crazy amount of current, like enough to be like a big river against you, and then people, oh, that's interesting. Like, plus, it's very cold. And so I think we had to walk this fine line about reviewing. I needed to teach people a lot very quickly about this area and specifically this race course, without, dragging it out and being super boring. Like, we interviewed one of the racers is this, is a data scientist, Matt Pruis. He's like this incredibly smart man he brought us like 3D models of how like tides work in 3 dimensions and stuff, and gave me very detailed information, but it doesn't fit in the movie. It's far too detailed. So just like figuring out how to educate to the point where people would understand the challenges, so that when people saw the emotional experience of the racers going through those places, it had context and meaning.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it helped that you had a nautical background, a sailing background, an understanding of this area of the world?
I imagine so.
Yeah, I would guess so in doing it. Well, let's come back to the financial issue, Lee, because I would think with all independent filmmaking, money is huge. How did you raise the money from the get-go, and were you raising it all along while you were putting this together?
Yeah, I mean, we were lucky in that, and this was part of why we thought we could actually do a documentary, because there was such a big community of support behind the race. And so our first stop was just seeing if there was anyone interested in being investors in the film, just from the community itself. And, you know, Zach is from Seattle. That's his community. He's worked with the Wooden Boat Association in Seattle. What's the name of it, Zach?
In Seattle, and Northwest Maritime is in Port
So we had connections. Zach had connections there as far as people he could reach out to for sponsorship. And then eventually, so that got us through quite a bit of the initial editing and footage gathering and making sure Zach was could, you know, pay for food while he's working 24/7 on this thing. And then towards the end, we were able to do deferred payments that were then paid for by the Kickstarter campaign, which was a pretty cool experience. It went well, so thank God.
How much did you end up raising through Kickstarter?
Ian, do you want to take that one?
Just over 40,000 or just under 40,000? I think it was like
Oh, that's
40 on the
fine.
nose.
Yeah,
That's terrific. So a film like this, may I ask what it costs to produce something as big as this kind of documentary?
Well, you
we
can ask.
say.
If you, it depends on how you want to frame it, I think. Like this was with I don't actually know, because Zach got 5 years of filming, you know, that the Northwest Maritime Center put into this, and I'm not sure of those budgets.
Right.
I only know like the post-production side, which is over $100,000 just for like, and that's, I think we got a lot of favors to make it at that.
Got it.
But I think when we were going, like there's probably closer to I don't know, $250,000 to $500,000 on the screen.
Mhm.
But a lot of it's hard to quantify too with the
Yeah.
working with a nonprofit. One of the benefits of that is that people love this race and people love that nonprofit. So when you ask that community, hey, we need a big boat to house our media crew, one shows up and
Mhm.
and they actually say like, no, you don't have to pay for fuel. It's not always. Sometimes they need fuel, but like there's a lot of sort of favor trade going back and forth there. So like to do it from scratch would be way more than from having that wonderful access.
Exactly. Now I understand that. Well, we are running short of time, so let me quickly have any lessons you learned by tackling this film, and then one last one after that is there anything we haven't discussed that you'd like to share with our viewers?
I can tie it together. I mean, kind of riffing off what Zach just said, like the lessons. This is all of our first feature documentaries. Leave has produced another feature narrative film, but just seeing the amount of the infrastructure and the people who loved the race, and like being able to talk with them and get to know them through the process is just really great. But also, like Zach said, like the movie wouldn't exist without them. I mean, the racers filmed themselves, they documented themselves, and so I guess just very thankful that they were willing to share that with us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say like
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Leo, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just gonna say you watch the credits of a film, and I've made movies for years, and this just reinforced how important every name in the credits are. Like, there's hundreds of people in our credits, and they all really played an important role in making this thing exist. So I think like if to share with an audience is like don't take that for granted. It's such a group effort. It's such a cool thing that all those people contributed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Leave.
Man, I mean, this film is kind of a culmination of a lot of years living in Los Angeles and working in the industry in different ways, but it's kind of the dream to get to work on a project that you really believe in and you really love and have it come out really well. And the things that we wanted to the audiences that we wanted to show it to were the racers, everybody surrounded with the race, people who love sailing, and then in general have this inspiring global theme. And to have that all come together through the hard work of Zach and Ian and myself, if I do say so, is just amazing. I mean, that's what you dream of as a film producer and as a filmmaker, is getting to do something like that, because it's hard and it doesn't always work out, and you don't always get a final product that you can actually share with people. So having that come to fruition is a big deal, and I'm incredibly grateful to have gotten to work on this.
Well, I think that you all should be incredibly proud of this film as well. Again, I thought it was fabulous, and not only dramatic, but inspiring, you know, as you were noting, and full of information. And I have a lot of friends around the country I'm sending, I'm going to encourage them, and sailor friends. And I said, you got to watch this film. So at any rate, I wish you all the best. And with that, I just want to thank you three for taking the time with us to share your insight into this film. And I also want to thank our major film festival sponsors, as well as the Race to Alaska sponsor, Adamski, Morosky, Madden, Cumberland, and Green. And with that, I'll just encourage our audience, don't forget to vote for this film and the others you watch. And take care and have a great day, and best wishes on all your future film projects. I'm sure they'll be great.
Thanks for having us.
Bye-bye. Oh, there, you're back. I was
Just in time to say goodbye. Sorry.
lost you. Anyway, goodbye and take care, and great film.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.